Alright, so we have a bit less than a week until Evernight finally comes out in Honkai Star Rail. And I know a lot of people are excited that we finally have her full kit info, so today I want to go over everything she does as well as touch on her signature light cone as well, to see for one, how good is she going to be in the game, and then for two, do I think she's going to be a good character for you to pull for on your account here. So let's jump right in. Evernight is an Ice Remembrance character, so she is going to be another one of these Memo Sprite summon characters. And we're going to skip over her basic attack because there aren't any specific mechanics attached to it. So let's start out with Evernight's talent, because we do get some info about her Memo Sprite here. So at the start of battle, Evernight is going to summon her Memo Sprite Eevee. Eevee is going to have 160 speed, and its max HP is going to be 50% of Evernight's max HP, which since Evernight should be building HP as well for her kit because she's an HP scaling character, you are going to have a good amount of HP on Eevee as well, which is going to be important as we go further into the kit here. Anytime Evernight or Eevee loses HP, they're both going to gain 60% crit damage for 2 turns, and they're also going to gain 2 Memoria, which is a resource we'll talk more about in the kit, but it is very important for Evernight's damage. This effect can trigger once per attack per target as well, so if you are fighting enemies that are attacking you a lot, you could very well get a lot of extra Memoria here, because that is going to be the main benefit that you get from this, since the crit damage buff will kind of just be there. It won't really stack super crazy, but the Memoria can stack up a ton. Also, when Evernight has at least 16 Memoria, he's going to cleanse any crowd control debuffs as well as become immune to them, and Eevee is going to be able to immediately take action if it is on the field. And this effect can only trigger once per use of the Memo Sprite skill titled Dream Dissolving as Dew, which we're going to go into in a bit here, because next I want to talk about Eevee's Memo Sprite skills as well as the Memo Sprite talents here. So starting out with the Memo Sprite skills, Eevee does have 2 skills here. The first one, Remembrance Whirling Like Rain, is a single target attack that will prioritize the most recent enemy attacked by Evernight, and for every 4 Memoria that Evernight has, it's going to increase the damage of this attack here as well, which is pretty nice, plus you're also going to get 1 Memoria as well. Next up for the other Memo Sprite skill, Dream Dissolving as Dew, which is probably one of the more important parts of the kit here. This attack can only activate if Evernight has at least 16 Memoria, and Evernight does not have any crowd control on her, which given this plus that last talent effect that we talked about, it is going to be pretty easy to keep crowd control off of her, because once you hit that 16 Memoria, it is going to cleanse any crowd control that she has. By activating this ability, you're going to consume all of Eevee's HP as well as all Memoria that Evernight currently has to attack all enemies. The damage of this attack is going to scale based on the amount of Memoria you consume, so if you do go above the 16 Memoria, you're going to be able to deal extra damage. And even though this attack is an AoE attack, it is still going to deal more damage to the primary target, which is going to be nice to get, some strong damage on an elite or boss enemy that you're fighting, so that is going to be very good as well. Next up for the Memo Sprite talents, there are 3 of them here. The first one, Solitude, Drifting, and Murk. Eevee is immune to crowd control effects, and also has an increased chance of being targeted, which really helps for those HP drain situations where you're going to get that extra crit damage as well through the talent. Also, anytime Evernight is on field, Evernight and Eevee are going to deal 50% more damage, which if Eevee's able to do anything, Evernight's going to be on the field, right? So this is pretty much a permanent 50% extra damage, which is super nice. The next Memo Sprite talent is Night, Trailing, and Step, which simply just makes Eevee immediately take action upon being summoned. So that is good as well, because you are going to be able to get that guaranteed 1 Memoria from the standard Memo Sprite skill, the Remembrance Whirling Like Rain. Finally, for the Memo Sprite talents, we have You, Parting Beyond Reach, which makes it so that when Eevee disappears, Evernight's speed is going to increase by 10% until the start of her next turn. And if Eevee disappears because you use the Memo Sprite skill, Dream Dissolving as Dew, which consumes all of her HP, you're going to increase Evernight's speed by an additional 1% for every Memoria consumed, and this can count up to 40 points of Memoria as well, and this speed increase will also last until the start of her next turn, which this could be nice to get a quick extra action, and depending on speed and action values, potentially give you an extra Evernight action at the end of a cycle. but that will be quite situational and will probably depend on For one, how much Memoria you have, but then secondly, also your build in terms of your speed and action value. But overall, a pretty solid ability as well. So now that we've covered all of the Memo Sprite abilities, let's jump back to Evernight and talk about her ultimate. So her ultimate will summon Eevee if Eevee is not currently on the field. This is going to have Eevee deal an attack towards all enemies, and Evernight is going to enter the Darkest Riddle state. During this state, enemies are going to take 30% more damage, and Evernight and Eevee are going to deal 60% more damage. So pairing that with the other buff from the Memo Sprite talent, they're going to be at an extra 110% damage already. Also, with the Darkest Riddle state, Evernight and Eevee will be immune to crowd control in general. And you're going to have 2 Darkest Riddle charges for this state. Anytime the Memo Sprite skill, Dream Dissolving as Dew, is used while having any amount of Darkest Riddle charges, you're going to consume 1 charge. And if Evernight has 0 charges at the start of her turn, then you're going to exit the Darkest Riddle state. And this state also is important outside of all those buffs because of a part of her skill, which we're going to go into right now. So for Evernight's skill, she's going to consume 10% of her current HP to summon Eevee if Eevee is not on the field. But if Eevee's already on the field, you're still going to consume the HP, but Eevee will be healed by 50% of its max HP, and will also cleanse any crowd control effects on Eevee at that time. Using the skill will also increase the crit damage of all Memo Sprites on the team by 24% of Evernight's crit damage for 2 turns. So this will help really any Remembrance Memo Sprite, which the Memo Sprite that gets the biggest benefit from this is going to be the Netherwing Dragon on Castorus. Also through using the skill, you get 2 Memoria, but if Evernight is in the Darkest Riddle state, she's going to gain an additional 12 Memoria, making that 14 Memoria total from using the skill, which will make it very easy to trigger that Dream Dissolving as Dew Memo Sprite skill, which is going to be a very big source of damage for her. Then for Evernight's technique, at the start of the next battle after using it, you're automatically going to activate part of her skill effect, which is going to give the crit damage buff for all ally Memo Sprites for 2 turns, and also give 1 Memoria as well. So being able to start battle with that crit damage buff already active, plus also the extra Memoria there too, is going to be very good, especially paired with Castorus, because you do have the Netherwing Dragon active with her technique right at the start of battle, so this will also be very good to have a bit of extra crit damage there. So now we've gone through that core kit there, let's talk about her traces. Starting with the Ascension 2 trace, Evernight and Eevee are going to get an unconditional 35% crit rate buff, which is going to be super nice and make her noticeably easier to build since you won't need as much crit rate to get to a good ratio. Whenever Evernight or Eevee use an ability, Evernight is going to consume 5% of her current HP, and is also going to give a 15% crit damage buff for herself and Eevee for 2 turns, which is just another way you can do even more damage here. Also, after using the Memo Sprite skill, Dreams Dissolving as Dew, you're also going to gain 1 skill point back, which can be very good to make sure that you're not running out of skill points too much, which I think is especially good with this team because you will want to get Evernight's skill off as much as possible, so having the extra skill point there can be very good. Next up for the Ascension 4 trace, at the start of battle, Evernight is going to get 70 energy and 1 Memoria. The Memoria is obviously going to be good to get towards the Dream Dissolving as Dew ability, but the 70 energy is very nice because Evernight does have a pretty high energy cost, so you are going to benefit from having that extra energy to get the Darkest Riddle state pretty early in battle. Also with this trace, whenever using an ability with Evernight or any ally Memo Sprite, Evernight is going to regain 5 energy and also get an additional Memoria. So another way to get more Memoria stacks so that you can get the Dream Dissolving as Dew ability off as much as possible. Then for the Ascension 6 trace, which honestly might be the most important trace in terms of deciding what comp Evernight is going to perform the best on. Depending on the number of Remembrance characters on the team, while the crit damage buff from Evernight's skill is active, the ally Memo Sprite crit damage buff will be increased by an extra amount based on the amount of Remembrance characters. And if you have more characters that are Remembrance on the team, the higher the buff increase is going to be. So with just 1 Remembrance character, aka just Evernight, it'll be an extra 5%. With 2 Remembrance characters, it's 15%. With 3, it's 50% extra. And then for 4, the entire team being Remembrance, it's 65% extra, which is a pretty big jump, especially from having 2 versus 3. So Evernight is going to work the best on teams that need a lot of remembrance characters. Then finally, for the stat traces here, Evernight's going to get 18.7% crit rate, 13.3% crit damage, and 18% HP, which are honestly some really good traces there for stats, making her even easier to build because with the crit rate, you do have a ton of crit rate even before you start considering relics, so you can focus more of your relics onto crit damage to also increase the base amount of the skill's crit damage buff. So now that we've gotten through the traces there, let's move into Evernight's Eidolons, which she does have some pretty interesting ones, especially for people who do want to vertically invest in her here. So starting out with her E1, whenever Evernight is on the field with a certain number of enemies, ally memo sprites are going to deal an increased amount of damage, and the less enemies there are, the higher this additional increase is going to be. So that is going to be very good overall to just give you more damage in lower target situations. Next up, for her E2, Evernight and Eevee are going to get an unconditional 40% crit damage buff, and anytime Evernight gains Memoria, she's going to gain an additional 2 Memoria, which is going to be very nice for increasing the damage output for the Dream Dissolving as Dew attack, because that does scale off of the amount of Memoria that you're consuming. Also, when Evernight uses her ultimate, she's going to gain an additional 2 Darkest Riddle charges, which is overall going to increase the duration of the Darkest Riddle state, which is going to be really good because of the high energy cost for her ultimate. So doubling the uptime for that is going to be very good, especially with how often you're going to be able to get the Dreams Dissolving as Dew ability with the additional Memoria from this as well. Next up, for her E4, whenever Evernight is on the field, all ally memo sprites are going to get a 25% break efficiency buff, and Eevee is going to get an additional 25% on top of that as well, which could be good if you're trying to break an enemy, but I wouldn't say as useful as the E1 and E2. And finally, for the E6, anytime Evernight is on the field, all allies are going to get a 20% all-type res pen increase, which is just going to mean more damage overall, plus a new type of buff that Evernight is not currently giving. And with the E6, after using Dream Dissolving as Dew, Evernight is going to recover 30% of the amount of Memoria she consumed, which is going to make you be able to trigger that even more often. So that is going to be very good for increasing her damage output as well, plus also just the general damage output of the entire team. So pretty solid Eidolons there, but before I talk about my thoughts on her overall value, let's talk about her signature light cone here. So this light cone is going to give 30% max HP, which is going to be very good for any HP scaling character. And whenever the wearer's memo sprite uses an ability, they're going to gain the Noctis effect permanently. This effect is going to make it so that all ally memo sprites can ignore 20% of enemies' defense. The wearer and the memo sprite will also deal 30% more damage, and whenever the wearer's memo sprite disappears, they're going to recover 8 energy, which this is obviously very good for Evernight, but could also be good for HP scaling characters that would benefit from the energy as well, which doesn't really include Casterus because she does not benefit off of energy. But once again, it is still a very good option for Evernight here. So now that we've gone over her kit, Eidolon, signature light cone, let's talk about my thoughts here. I think Evernight is going to be a really good character, but for a specific team. And that team, as I've mentioned throughout the video, is Casterus. Because now you're going to want to try to shift towards having as many remembrance characters as possible for the team, which if you pulled for Hyacinth, then you should have all 4 slots filled here, which would be Casterus, Evernight, Remembrance MC, and Hyacinth. Of course you can, mix and match, but I think the biggest thing is to try to have 3 remembrance characters if possible, being Casterus, Evernight, and Remembrance MC. Even if you don't have Hyacinth, which is my current situation, you still get that 50% extra crit damage from the Ascension 6 trace. Because the difference between 2 Remembrance allies and 3 is so large, you want to try to have 3 Remembrance allies if you can. And the thing with Evernight is that because she does give a lot of her value to Remembrance characters, whether it be because of Remembrance characters being on the team or giving buffs specifically to ally memo sprites, you are going to want to have her on a team with a lot of Remembrance characters. And really the only comp with that right now, or with enough Remembrance characters to make it worthwhile, is going to be the Casterus comp. So that is also very important to keep in mind. She is a character that's made to work extremely well with other Remembrance characters. Now, when it comes to her signature light cone, it is very strong, but there are some other options that you can use. I think the biggest one, which is the one I probably will use if I can't get her signature, is going to be the Shop light cone, because it does have a damage buff for all allies as well. But there probably are other light codes that can give you some decent like stats on her, because the main thing with Evernight is going to be, at least for personal stats, they're going to be HP percent and also crit damage to increase the scaling of her crit damage buff to ally memo sprites. But yeah, I definitely think that she'll probably be able to get by without her signature light cone, but that is obviously going to be her best option by a long shot. So now, do I think she's going to be a worthwhile character for you to pull for? I think if you're running a Casterus team, yes, pull for her, because already with Casterus plus Remembrance MC being free, you already have 2 Remembrance characters. You add that third one with Evernight, you're getting an extra 50% crit damage for all memo sprites on top of the buff that you'll get from her skill. But if you don't have Casterus, I honestly don't see where you're going to be using Evernight, because she wants Remembrance characters, and the only other Remembrance character that really doesn't like fit on that team is going to be Aglaya. And Aglaya's team would typically have energy characters like Sunday, Huo, so you're already taking up slots with characters to make Aglaya work. And by putting Evernight in one of those slots, like sure, Evernight can work a little bit better, but I feel like the damage buff probably won't be good enough because there aren't enough Remembrance characters there on Aglaya's team, making Evernight really just be locked into Caster's team for right now. I think that could change as time goes on if we get other Remembrance characters that can work well with Evernight, or work well with Aglaya if we get maybe like an energy, support Remembrance character. That could be something that'd be interesting. But for right now, I think if you don't have Casterus, Evernight is probably an easy skip for you, but she could be a character that could have more value on a future rerun if we get other Remembrance characters that'll make Evernight work in more places. But that's really all I have there for Evernight. I am going to be pulling for her myself, but I'd love to see what you all think in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed and want to see more content from me, be sure to hit that subscribe button. But with that, everyone, I will see you all next time.